If you ask a woman what she wants in a man, she will almost always give you a polite, predictable, and socially acceptable list. She'll say she wants someone kind, loyal, respectful, someone who listens, someone who puts her first, someone who makes her feel safe. On the surface, all of that sounds reasonable, and it's not that she's lying. The problem is that this list does not match what she actually responds to in real life. What she says and what she chooses are often two completely different things, and men who take her words literally set themselves up for failure. This is one of the brutal truths women will never admit out loud, because admitting it would expose their contradictions and force them to confront instincts they often don't even fully understand themselves. Attraction is not a choice in the way people think it is. It's not a logical checklist that gets ticked off in her mind. Attraction is emotional, primal, and automatic. A man can have all the nice qualities in the world and still fail to spark that deep pull that makes her want to be near him. On the other hand, a man who doesn't even meet half her spoken criteria can light a fire in her simply by the way he carries himself, the way he speaks with confidence, or the way he is unavailable to her attention. Women don't respond to promises. They respond to energy, and the energy of strength, independence, and leadership will always outweigh the energy of constant compliance. This is why so many men are left confused. They follow advice that women themselves give. Be nice, treat her like a queen, show her you care. They go all in with affection, long messages, constant availability, and endless reassurances. Then they're shocked when all of that effort earns them nothing but boredom or rejection. Meanwhile, a man who barely invests, who doesn't chase, who focuses on his own life and demands respect, ends up being the one she can't stop thinking about. It seems unfair, it seems hypocritical, but it's the raw truth about attraction. She cannot control who she feels drawn to, no matter how much she might wish it lined up with her words. Women live in two worlds, at once the world of social appearances and the world of instinct. In the world of appearances, she will always want to present herself as reasonable, ethical, and consistent. That means saying the right things when asked about men. But in the world of instinct, the one that really drives her behavior, she is wired to respond to dominance, confidence, and challenge. This is why she'll tell you she wants a man who is sweet and agreeable, but in reality, she is magnetized by the man who isn't afraid to say no to her, who won't bend his life to fit her expectations, who demands respect before offering commitment. Think about the countless examples in everyday life. A woman might have a long-time friend who is always there for her, always willing to help, always confessing his feelings. She will say he's such a great guy, but she never chooses him. Instead, she gives her time, energy, and heart to the man who doesn't ask for permission, who doesn't shower her with constant validation, who sometimes frustrates her, but also excites her. To the man listening to her words, this doesn't make sense. But to the man who understands her responses, it's perfectly clear. Her instincts don't reward predictability. They reward the man who makes her feel something she cannot control. This is why listening to words without observing actions is dangerous. Women often don't admit this discrepancy, not because they're trying to be manipulative, but because it's uncomfortable to acknowledge. To admit that they're not really moved by kindness alone, or that they crave strength even when it feels unfair, would be to admit that their psychology is not as pure as they would like to believe, so they keep repeating the same polite answers, while their actions tell the real story. The brutal truth is that if you're the man who listens only to what she says, you will always end up confused. The man who learns to pay attention to her responses instead of her words is the one who wins. She may say she values constant attention. If you give it too easily, she loses respect. She may say she wants reassurance, but when you deliver it excessively, she loses attraction. She may say she's looking for someone who puts her first, but when you do that at the expense of your own mission and independence, she begins to feel she can walk all over you. What she responds to is not sacrifice, it's self-respect. A woman is drawn to a man who knows his worth, not the one who constantly tries to prove it. She is drawn to the man who doesn't collapse under pressure, who can walk away if she disrespects him, who doesn't treat her attention as the highest prize in his life. The more he shows her that he values himself above seeking her approval, the more she feels pulled into his orbit. This is something she will rarely admit, because to say it out loud is to admit that words and actions are not aligned. She will protect her image by repeating what sounds right, but her true behavior will always reveal what she truly wants. There is a silent tragedy playing out in the lives of countless men, and it is rooted in a misunderstanding of what giving truly means in relationships. Men are raised to believe that the more they give, the more they will be loved. Give her your time, give her your affection, give her your loyalty, give her your money, give her your energy, and eventually she will see your value and reward you with love, loyalty, and devotion. It sounds logical, it sounds fair, but it is the exact formula that destroys a man's worth in the eyes of a woman. The harsh truth is this: the more you give without boundaries, the less you are valued. Women may never say this directly, but their behavior proves it over and over again. When a man gives excessively, he believes he is building security. He thinks he is proving himself, showing her that she matters, that he is dependable and irreplaceable. But women are not wired to respect men who overextend themselves without requiring anything in return. Instead of seeing it as love, they interpret it as weakness. They sense that this man is trying to buy their affection, that he is operating from a place of insecurity, hoping that the more he provides, the more she will feel obligated to stay. Attraction does not grow from obligation. Attraction grows from respect, and respect cannot survive in an environment where one person is endlessly sacrificing and the other is endlessly receiving. A woman will test boundaries without even consciously realizing she's doing it. She will notice how quickly a man cancels his plans to accommodate her. She will see how eager he is to spend money on her, to shower her with gifts, to constantly be available for her emotional needs. At first, it might feel flattering, but over time it begins to feel suffocating. The unspoken thought in her mind becomes, if he is willing to give me everything without hesitation, what does that say about his own value? It is counterintuitive, but human psychology is built this way. What comes too easily is rarely respected. This is why men who give too much end up losing the most. They pour everything into her, only to watch her drift away toward a man who gives far less. The difference isn't about money or effort, it's about energy. The man who gives strategically, who gives with boundaries, communicates through his actions that his resources are valuable and not to be wasted. The man who gives endlessly communicates that his value is low, that he needs her approval to feel complete. One man is respected, the other is pitied, and pity never transforms into desire. There is also a darker reality at play. When a man gives too much, he teaches a woman to take him for granted. It's not necessarily malicious, it's simply human nature. If someone is always there, always giving, always sacrificing, the brain adjusts and begins to see this as normal. It stops registering as special. What once might have been appreciated as generosity eventually feels like expectation. She doesn't wake up in awe of his devotion. She wakes up expecting it, and the moment he stops, she feels cheated. This creates a toxic cycle where the man must give more and more just to maintain the same level of attention, until eventually he burns out and realizes she was never truly invested in him to begin with. Women will rarely admit this truth because it makes them look ungrateful. They don't want to be seen as people who disregard kindness, yet their attraction is not guided by social politeness. It's guided by primal psychology. On a deep level, women are drawn to men who protect their resources, who do not spill their time and energy recklessly. This signals strength, self-respect, and status. A man who is selective about what he gives communicates that he has value worth protecting. A man who gives endlessly communicates desperation, and desperation is the fastest way to kill desire. Think about how often you hear stories of men who did everything right. He was loyal, he was devoted, he was always there, and yet she left him for someone else. The reason is not that women don't value kindness. It's that kindness without boundaries is not strength, it's submission. And submission, when it comes from a man in the context of attraction, does not inspire love. It inspires control, it inspires testing, and eventually it inspires contempt. What men fail to see is that women don't fall in love with the man who bends over backward. They fall in love with the man who stands tall, who gives with intention, and who makes it clear that his generosity has limits. The brutal truth is this: men who give too much often lose not just the woman, also themselves. They spend so much energy trying to please that they forget to demand respect. They focus so much on proving their worth that they forget their worth is not something to be proven. It's something to be lived. And once a woman sees that a man will give without limits, she loses the very sense of challenge and admiration that fuels her attraction in the first place. The most misunderstood truth about attraction is that women are not drawn to men who center their lives around pleasing them. They may say they want a man who caters to their needs, who makes them the priority, who does everything to keep them happy. But in practice, that kind of man rarely excites them. What actually sparks desire, what keeps their attention and respect, is a man who is powerful in his presence and independent in his life. Power here does not mean control or aggression. It means a deep sense of self, respect, authority over one's own choices, and an unwillingness to compromise identity for approval. Independence means a man's life is not dictated by her moods, her opinions, or her validation. A man who embodies both power and independence becomes magnetic, while the man who makes pleasing behavior his strategy finds himself ignored, disrespected, or quietly discarded. Pleasing behavior comes from a man's fear of loss. He thinks that if he doesn't constantly do what she wants, she will leave. So he bends, he compromises, he sacrifices his priorities to maintain harmony. At first, it may seem to work. She may express appreciation, she may even reward him temporarily with affection. But over time, the dynamic shifts. What he sees as devotion, she begins to see as weakness. She tests his boundaries, not out of cruelty but out of instinct. And when she finds none, her respect begins to erode. The very thing he thought would make her stay becomes the reason she eventually drifts away. Power is not in words, it's in behavior. When a man doesn't crumble under pressure, when he refuses to tolerate disrespect, when he walks away from situations that compromise his standards, that is power. Women respond to it even if they never admit it. They may complain about stubbornness, they may argue with his decisions, but deep down, they feel an undeniable pull toward a man who leads his life with conviction. That conviction creates an aura of certainty, and certainty is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess. A man who is certain of who he is doesn't need to prove himself through constant pleasing. His very presence communicates that he is a man of value, and women respond to that presence with attention and respect. Independence is equally crucial. A man who lives for a woman's approval is like a ship without an anchor, drifting in whichever direction the wind blows. He becomes reactive instead of directive, waiting for her to validate him before he feels secure. This lack of independence suffocates attraction. On the other hand, a man who has his own mission, his own goals, his own purpose outside of her, becomes far more compelling. She realizes she cannot fully control him, that he is not dependent on her affection for his sense of worth. This dynamic creates tension, challenge, and mystery, the ingredients that fuel attraction far more than constant accommodation ever could. Look at the men who women chase most passionately. They are not the ones begging for attention or rearranging their entire lives to fit her desires. They are the ones who remain centered in their own reality. They offer love, but they don't beg for it. They give, but never at the cost of self-respect. They are present with her, but their lives do not revolve around her. Women are naturally drawn to men who have a strong gravitational pull of their own. Men whose independence makes them stand out. Men whose power makes them hard to replace. The man who relies on pleasing behavior doesn't understand this. He believes relationships are built on endless giving, endless compromise, endless bending. He thinks that if he gives her everything, she will never leave. But what he doesn't realize is that, in giving her everything, he strips himself of the very qualities that made him valuable in the first place. Without independence, he becomes predictable. Without power, he becomes forgettable. And once he is seen as forgettable, no amount of pleasing will reignite her attraction. Women may never say this truth out loud because it's uncomfortable to admit that they are more attracted to power and independence than to unconditional pleasing would be to expose their contradictions. They will say they want the man who puts them first at all times, but they will chase the man who doesn't. They will say they value endless giving. They will fantasize about the man who refuses to bend. Words are appearances, responses are reality. Their deepest responses reveal that respect and attraction cannot exist without a man holding on to his own power and independence. This is why the strongest relationships are not built on one-sided pleasing but on mutual respect. A woman cannot respect a man who abandons himself just to keep her comfortable. She respects the man who loves her without losing himself, who gives without surrendering his identity, who values her but never makes her his entire purpose. Power and independence create the foundation for this respect, and without them, attraction withers no matter how much effort a man puts into pleasing behavior. When most men think about love, they imagine it as an emotional bond built on affection, romance, and shared moments. They think that if a woman laughs at their jokes, shows them affection, or says she loves them, that love will last forever. But love without respect is fragile, temporary, and ultimately doomed. What many men never realize is that a woman's respect for a man is the single most important foundation for her love. She can feel attraction, she can feel comfort, she can feel excitement, but if she does not respect him at his core, those emotions will eventually fade. Respect is the soil in which all other emotions grow, and without it, nothing survives. Respect shapes how a woman sees a man. If she respects him, she sees his flaws as forgivable. If she respects him, she sees his sacrifices as meaningful. If she respects him, she sees his presence as irreplaceable. But if she loses respect, everything changes. Suddenly, the very qualities she once tolerated become unbearable. His kindness feels suffocating. His affection feels undeserved. His presence begins to feel like a burden rather than a blessing. Men are often blindsided when this shift happens. The truth is simple: respect was gone long before the relationship ended. The reason respect carries such weight is because it is tied to instinct. Women are wired to seek out strength, leadership, and stability in a man. These traits are not about money or status. They are about character. A man who stands firm in his values, who refuses to tolerate disrespect, who can make decisions under pressure, is a man who earns respect naturally. A woman may not always like his decisions, she may not always agree with his boundaries, but the fact that he has them commands her respect. On the other hand, a man who bends his values for approval, who lets disrespect slide, who hesitates to assert himself out of fear of conflict, chips away at the very foundation of her admiration. Respect is also tied to how a man views himself. If he sees himself as valuable, if he acts with confidence and self-assurance, she will mirror that perception. But if he constantly seeks validation, if he treats her approval as the measure of his worth, she will unconsciously begin to see him as lesser. It is not that she consciously wants to degrade him. It is that her instincts cannot honor a man who doesn't honor himself. This is the brutal reality men often ignore. You cannot earn respect by begging for it, and you cannot keep love alive once respect is gone. A woman can forgive mistakes if she respects the man making them. She can forgive anger, she can forgive moments of distance, she can even forgive betrayal in some cases. But what she cannot forgive is weakness of character. Weakness, in this sense, is not about physical strength. It is about the inability to stand on one's own, to set boundaries, to walk away when necessary. When a woman senses this kind of weakness, her respect begins to die, and with it, her love. This is why men who overgive, over-apologize, or over-pursue rarely find lasting happiness in relationships. They confuse affection with respect, not realizing that affection without respect is empty. Think about how women speak about the men they admire most. They describe them with words like strong, decisive, confident. He doesn't take nonsense from anyone. These are markers of respect. Now think about how women describe men they no longer value. They use words like too nice, clingy, boring, or weak. These labels may sound superficial, but beneath them is the deeper truth. Respect is missing. And once respect is missing, no amount of affection or gifts can bring it back. Men often make the mistake of thinking love is about keeping her happy at all costs. They avoid conflict. They silence their needs. They suppress their boundaries, all in the name of love. But in doing so, they destroy the very thing that sustains love: respect. A woman may enjoy temporary comfort when a man bends over backwards for her, but she cannot maintain long-term desire for him. Deep down, she craves the man who will stand up to her, who will hold her accountable, who will not allow her to erode his dignity. This man may frustrate her, he may challenge her, but she will respect him, and that respect will keep her love alive. The truth men need to understand is that emotions are fleeting, excitement fades. Comfort can turn into boredom, attraction can shift. But respect is the glue that holds love together through all of it. A woman who respects her man will stay loyal, even through storms. A woman who loses respect will leave, even if she still feels affection. Respect is not built through grand gestures or endless giving. It is built through consistent self-respect, firm boundaries, and unwavering character. The brutal truth about women and men is not found in polite words or in the fantasy ideals society tries to sell. It is found in actions, in instincts, and in the hidden psychology that most people are too afraid to admit. Women don't fall in love with what they say they want. They fall in love with what they respond to. Men who give without limits lose the very respect they are trying to buy. Pleasing behavior may look like devotion. It kills attraction faster than rejection ever could. And at the core of it all is respect. Because without a woman's respect, no affection, no attraction, and no love can survive. The men who understand this stop living for approval and start living with power and independence. They stop bending themselves into what they think women want and instead embody what women cannot help but respond to. This is not about manipulation, it's about truth. A man who commands respect commands love. A man who protects his value becomes irreplaceable. And a man who refuses to lose himself to gain her will always stand above the one who gives everything away and ends up with nothing.